Okay, so it looks like we have most folks into the meeting now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Special Harvest License webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Once again, my name is Janine Higgins, and I'll be the facilitator for our session tonight. We also have a few folks working in the background with us technically who have their videos turned off, who are looking after all of the nitty-gritty technical aspects of tonight. So you'll hear from me for most of the evening, but there are a few folks helping us out in the background for tonight as well. So while we normally like to host these sessions in person, we are so thankful to have technology helping us out for this evening. Hopefully we don't have any technical glitches. If you were with us last night, we had a few things happen in the background, but I think we'll be good to go for tonight. So tonight's meeting will be recorded and also posted onto our YouTube account, as well as our engagement webpage. So to start off this evening, I would like to first respectfully acknowledge that I am joining this evening from Edmonton in Treaty 6 territory, and I would like to acknowledge the many First Nations and Métis whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I honor and respect the elders of the past, the present, and the future. And I ask that since we are joining from across Alberta this evening, that each one of us takes time to personally acknowledge the Indigenous people of our region. So if you've been with us for the last two nights, we'll have a very similar agenda to what we've been doing in the past. So we'll go through our welcome where we can talk about sort of the technical aspects of this evening and how we will have it set up before we go into our presentation. So we actually have two lead presenters who are joining us here tonight. So we'll hear from both of them for about a 20-minute long presentation before we move into our question and answer. And we'll be closing the evening at 8:30 p.m. tonight. So I see a few folks have already found the Q&A button at the bottom of their screen, which is fantastic. So similar to the other webinars that we've been running on our fisheries engagement, we are going to be using the question and answer tool. So we do have 3 questions that have been pre-submitted. So again, thank you to everybody who submitted questions when they registered through Zoom. So we've chosen 3 sort of common themes or great questions that came up that we'll be going through first before we move into the live question and answer. So if you haven't done it already, you can open up your Q&A box and you can start typing your questions in there. Similar to other evenings, for tonight, we are going to be using our upvoting tool. So you can upvote questions that folks have written in there that you would like to hear answered tonight. And so that's one of the ways that we'll be sorting through our questions for this evening. Keeping a special focus, of course, on our special harvest licenses, as that's the topic for tonight. So in terms of the questions that are being submitted in here, inappropriate questions will be deleted. So anything with profanity or that's inappropriate in nature will just be removed from the system. And if we've already addressed your question, then it will be dismissed. So again, we're trying to answer a broad diversity of questions on special harvest licenses this evening. And so we'll be doing our best to provide great responses to the questions that you have, but also making sure that we're answering a diversity of them. So if we have already responded, we will dismiss your question. So fear not, if we don't get to your question tonight, don't worry, there's still lots of opportunities to engage with all of our fisheries staff. You can go and visit our engagement webpage, which we have the link here, but you can also just Google it in order to find it. If you Google 2021 Sport Fishing Regulations Survey, it should be one of the first things that comes up. And in there we have an Ask the Expert section. So this is a really great tool that we're using. I believe there's already 18 questions that have been posted. So you can go there and actually sort them based on topic by clicking on the tags that have been put into the questions, and you can have a look and see if your question has already been asked and answered, or you can submit a question that hasn't been responded to yet. So great opportunity to interact with our folks there. So to introduce our panel tonight, similar to other nights, we have a big group of folks here to be able to answer all of your questions. So our lead presenters are Chris Briggs and Ben Kissinger. So we'll hear from both of them tonight in our presentation. And then we'll have all of our panelists join us, who you can see on the screen here, who will be taking us through the question and answer section. So for tonight, we have Christy and Marcel, Jason, who are our senior fisheries biologists and fisheries biologists. We also have Bill Patterson, who is our provincial fish allocation and use specialist. We have Kadon, Jordan, and Stuart, who are our fisheries managers. And just so folks know, Jordan's going to be doing some of our technical things in the background this evening, so he may not be as active on the panel as some of the other folks. And then we also have Matt Besco and Dave Park here, who are directors of wildlife health and licensing and fish and wildlife policy, and then Craig Copeland, who is our fish culture manager. So a broad diversity of folks who are here to respond to your questions when we move into that section of the evening. So with that, I would like to pass it off to our panelists, or sorry, not our panelists, our lead presenters, to take us through the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ray, and welcome everyone. My name is Chris Briggs. As mentioned, I'm the Senior Fisheries Biologist in the Peace River Office of Alberta Environment and Parks. So the first part of this presentation is going to take you through a brief overview of the current Special Harvest License Program, including some of the feedback we've received from previous engagements on some changes that people would like to see to the program itself. There we go. Alberta's Walleye Special Harvest License, or SHL program, first began in 2016. I'll do that again. Sorry, folks. And over the past 15 years, a total of 31 lakes have been part of the program. Some lakes have been removed over the past decade and a half due to natural processes, example, winter kill, or the population itself became at a higher risk to sustainability. And in the 2020-2021 regulation cycle, 8 lakes were converted from the SHL program into a harvest slot regulation, leaving 15 lakes currently remaining in the Walleye SHL program. Special harvest licenses are a way to allow for harvested lakes where an open harvest regulation would be a threat to the sustainability of the population, largely due just to the amount of angling pressure. Simply, if all anglers were allowed to take a fish home, the population would be at serious risk. It can also be used in some cases on lakes where the walleye population needs to be recovered, but there is still the option for some harvest. The trade-off to this is a slower recovery as compared to a catch and release regulation. In either case, the SHL is an alternative to catch and release on these lakes. There are 3 classes of walleye SHL currently as part of the program. The Class A, so these are the larger fish, greater than 50 centimeters. Class B, between 43 and 50 centimeters. And the Class C, under 43 centimeters. Not all lakes have all these 3 size classes available. And tags are allocated based on monitoring data that's conducted at regular intervals. So the frequency of this monitoring depends on the population. So in lakes with a consistent population from year to year, monitoring is less frequent. Frequent monitoring is critical to ensure that the population is at a sustainable level. It also allows the biologist to maximize the harvest of the different size categories. The program itself is modeled after hunting draws. Licenses are granted based on a draw system. Applications can be made for up to 3 lakes and for each of the 3 classes of license. However, you can only hold 1 class of tag at a single lake at this time. Once drawn, you are then removed from remaining draws that you may have entered. If you're unsuccessful, you do gain priority points, similar to the wildlife hunting draws, and then eventually those will lead to a draw. A successful draw gives you a license that has 2 tags for Class A or 3 tags for Class B or C fish, so each tag allows you to harvest 1 fish. Approximately 20,000 people participate in the SHL program annually, which represents less than 6% of licensed anglers, which is an even lower percentage of total anglers when you factor in youth and seniors who do not require to get a license. In 2017, during an online survey, participants were asked the following question: do you support the use of SHL in lakes that would otherwise have a catch and release regulation? And the majority of the over 2,700 respondents indicated that they do support, at least somewhat or greater, the Special Harvest License Program as an alternative to catch and release. However, like any program, people do have a few, comments and concerns. Some of which are the actual tags themselves. These are difficult to attach, fall off easily. This seems to be a fairly common one we've heard both during public engagement sessions and just sort of random phone calls or meetings on the side of lakes. Some other comments are with the Class C, so the small size fish, maybe not being as desirable and perhaps undersubscribed. And then these cannot be obtained by existing holders of other tags. Another one is that youth are required to apply for their own tags, which could be really seen as an impediment to young anglers getting into the program. This last one, for youth harvest, is actually changes are already underway to allow youth to harvest under someone else's special harvest license. So that is one that we've already heard and taken action on. So in summary, the Walleye SHL program allows for harvest in lakes that would not be able to sustain an open harvest regulation and would otherwise have a catch and release regulation put on it. Monitoring is required to ensure that the fish populations and fisheries remain sustainable and to maximize the harvest and number of tags able to be allocated to anglers. The feedback we've received so far is that there are changes that could be made. We've listened to this feedback, and now Ben will describe some of the options that have been developed in response.
Thanks, Chris, for that introductory material. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in and listening about some possible changes that we're looking at for the SHL program. As mentioned, these are options. Nothing is set in stone yet, and we're seeking input from you. So please participate in the surveys after listening to this presentation. So one option that we're considering currently is the elimination of the less than 43 centimeter size class. We're looking at potentially doing that and still keeping the class B's and A's, or possibly moving to a system where an angler could use a tag on any size fish. So let's examine the trade-offs of these two options. Before we go into those two options, I just want to quickly describe the current system we have in place so that we can compare it to these two. So currently we have tags in three categories, as Chris described earlier: less than 43, 43 to 50, and greater than 50 centimeters. By doing this, we distribute tags in the harvest of walleye across a range of sizes within a given population. By doing this, we maximize the number of fish that can be harvested within a given lake. And within this hypothetical lake here, I have 10 tags allocated. It's purely to describe the changes in tags that we might see when we move to a different potential regulation. So looking at option one, removing the under 43s and just keeping 43 to 50 and greater than 50, so the A's and B's. By doing this, we would have a reduction in overall tags. It's estimated about 20%, because we would be moving a few of the tags up to larger sizes, but because a large proportion of the population is no longer available to harvest, there would have to be some level of a reduction. So the advantages of this are that there would be less size classes for administration and a greater number of fish moved in available to harvest in those larger size categories. But as mentioned, there would be approximate 20% reduction in lakes. And remember that this could vary lake by lake depending on what fish are available in different sizes. Another issue is that this is likely less responsive to strong year classes that would move through the population, especially in those smaller sizes, specifically under 43. So those fish would no longer be available to harvest, and you'd have to wait until they got into larger sizes. In addition, this has the potential to be a less effective tool if SHL is being used to recover a population. because it would allow harvest in the larger sizes, which are the breeding stock. So option number 2, that is a possibility, is having a no size system. So basically an angler would get a tag and they could apply it on any size fish they wanted. The 3 categories would no longer exist. So if you're an individual that likes keeping smaller fish, you could put it on a smaller fish. If you're a person that likes big fish, you could put it on something over 50. And if you're a person who just likes to put it on the first fish you catch, you can put it on the first fish you catch. Under this system, we assume anglers are likely going to focus on larger size fish to get the most bang for their buck. And because of this, our models suggest that there have to be an overall reduction in the number of tags we could issue for a given lake, similar to what we saw in the previous one. So we dropped down from 10 to 8, about a 20% reduction. So some advantages of this system would be there'd be substantially less overall administration, because there'd no longer be any size categories to have to apply for tags for. There'd be greater flexibility on which fish gets to be kept. So if, as mentioned before, if anglers like big ones, they can keep big ones. If they like small ones, they can keep small ones. And technically the first fish you catch, you can keep. So for individuals who go out there with a certain tag and try really hard and they keep catching fish outside the size range of their tag, this issue would be eliminated. As mentioned prior, there would be a 20% reduction in the number of tags and walleye available to harvest. Under this system, there is potential for overharvest of larger size fish, since we don't have a control on which angler or which fish an angler would choose. And it's likely less effective as a recovery tool in populations where we're trying to recover that for similar reasons as I described before. It's also likely less responsive to strong year classes. While individuals would have an opportunity to harvest smaller sizes if there was a big boom of small size fish coming in, they might choose to focus on the large fish. In our 3 size category system that we have present, it focuses and forces individuals to harvest more fish in those small sizes when those are available. So because we talked about reductions in tag numbers moving into these 2 systems, we also wanted to look at the option of making sure that there's enough licenses on the landscape. So we're looking at possibly moving from 3 tags to 2. So this would, in our class C's and B's, where 3 tags are currently allocated, those would move to 2s, just like our class A's. By doing this, we would keep the same number of licenses on the landscape as what we have now, even with a 20% reduction, but anglers would only have 2 tags. Another option that we're looking at is moving away from the draw system and going to a first come, first serve. This would be similar to a campground booking system that we have for reservations. And there would be substantially less administration and the draw fee would be removed. Some drawbacks to this are that the licenses could sell out quickly and could result in frustration for those who are unsuccessful. We also need to consider what to do with priority points. Under this system, we would no longer need priority points, so how we deal with priority points would need to be considered because they'd no longer exist in this new system. Lastly, the feedback that we received about how people don't like using the current paper tags because they don't stick together and they get damaged when they're in the live well and they potentially fall off. One option that has been in development is moving to a digital option. So this option would be electronic and would allow you to mark fish as harvested on an app. So in summary, just to review the 4 things we're putting forward, and just to drive home to the point that these are not set in stone at all. We're looking for your feedback, so please take the survey. The 4 options that we're considering are reducing or eliminating the number of size classes within the current tag system to potentially have 2 or a no size system. We're also looking at potentially reducing the number of tags per license from 3 to 2. Also looking at potentially moving from the draw system to a first come first serve model. And lastly, exploring additional options to supplement the current physical tag used by license holders, specifically looking at the electronic version through a person's smartphone. So please take the survey online at the end of this presentation. And at this time, we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both Ben and Chris, for that really great presentation. So we are going to move into the question and answer portion of our evening now. So if you are new joining us tonight, again, look to the bottom of your screen where you can see that Q&A button to open it up. We've had lots of really great questions come in so far. So have a read through the questions that are there. Make sure you scroll to the very bottom to see all of the questions that have been submitted. And we'll move into the live Q&A after we go through our 3 pre-submitted questions that we have here. So the first one came from Stephen, and this was submitted again through the Zoom platform in the registration section. So Stephen's question was, why are walleye such a protected species? So I'll invite the panel to join us again here. If you haven't turned your video back on, we'll get you to do that now. And then I'll just read out our first question again. So it was from Stephen, and his question was, why are walleye such a protected species?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Janine. I'll take that question. So yeah, that's a great question. You know, walleye, as we know, are one of the most popular and sought after sport fish here in Alberta and in also many other jurisdictions. So in terms of protection, I guess that the active management, the different regulations, the frequency of changes to those regulations and the harvest limits that occurs for walleye here in Alberta could be easily interpreted as walleye being protected, especially, you know, from that perspective of looking back as, you know, walleye went through some significant declines in the late 80s and 90s, resulting in a number of collapses of populations throughout the province to where we are today. Again, there was, you know, some significant declines back in that time period with, you know, less restrictive harvest regulations, so no size limit or no size limits, or maybe there was a maximum size of fish had to be greater than, you know, so many inches, and there was also higher bag limits of 5 fish, you know, resulted in so some of those declines where, you know, we had to actually implement the 1995, if folks remember back then, the Alberta, you know, Walleye Management Recovery Plan, where, yeah, we saw a lot of the fisheries in the province move to catch and release in order to recover those populations. So yes, they were being, you know, protected at that time, but, you know, through that protection and recovery, now we're in a position where, you know, in 2006 we were looking at opening some of these fisheries with the use of the tool that was discussed here tonight, that being the special walleye harvest license, and also, you know, if you tuned in last night, trialing some of the harvest lots as well. So you know, to wrap it up and get back to that question. So again, in terms of protection, you know, we use SHL and other regulations to manage or protect walleye to ensure, you know, Alberta has sustainable walleye fisheries for you, the anglers. And also, you know, fish, you know, no matter the species, are a truly valued resource. So yeah, that's a great question. And thanks, Stephen, for taking the time to submit it while you were registering for the webinar here. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Jason. And we're just having some folks with a little bit of technical difficulties. So again, if you see people kind of coming and going from the panel, that's why. So we're just sorting out some of those issues on the back end. So another question that we had submitted from Les, which Ben, you did talk about this, but I see there's also another question that's come in to the Q&A from Robert, specifically asking, would you consider a zip tie system instead of the green paper system? It doesn't work well. And Les's question was, when can we get a different type of tag system that doesn't just fall off the chains or in the live wells?
So Janine, I can answer this for sure. So thank you to all the folks on the Q&A sessions that have asked this question. There's a number of questions that are closely related on this issue. And it's true, there's a number of issues around the current tag that we have right now with respect to it's not adhering properly when it gets wet. When the fish is in the live well, the tag will fall off the wires. The ink on the tag may fade, and it becomes difficult in order to show legal harvest using that particular method. So we are looking, as Ben said in his presentation, we're looking at a number of alternatives to use rather than the paper tag and wire. Some of them would include, as Ben mentioned, a digital app which doesn't have to be connected online for you to go into that app and cancel your tags and do that electronically. And then as soon as you, and that would lock it into the app as long as you have power on your phone, and that would quickly upload as soon as you got to cell coverage. Other alternative means by which we would look at would be a draw booklet by which you would date and notch your fish, or not the actual fish, but the actual draw booklet itself, or the use of alternative tag technologies, such as using plastic tags or metal tags. So we'll be looking to the feedback on the online survey that folks would be able to answer in order to get better feedback and looking at these alternatives. The answer is yes, we're going to be looking at better ways to tag our fish. Thanks.
So I think I can add to what Matt's said to you there too, by sharing with you that we've made a regulation amendment recently to take the references to tags and tagging instructions out of our legislation. So by doing that, we're able now to make tagging, other forms of harvest validation, terms of the license itself, terms and conditions of the license itself, not written in the legislation. So it gives us the opportunity to be innovative and to try different things now that we didn't have previously. So we're very sincere about looking for options.
Great, thank you, Dave, for adding to that. I'm sure that will come to many people's joy based on the feedback that we've received so far. So our last pre-submitted question that we had through our Zoom registration comes from Kenneth, and I see Kenneth is here tonight with us as well, so that's really great to see. So what criteria are used to determine the use of this harvest tool over others?
I'll take that one. Thank you. Thanks, Kenneth, for the question. This tool is used typically on lakes with relatively good population. So if you're looking at our FSI system, it would be higher than an FSI 3. But lakes where they receive a lot of pressure. So these are typically lakes close to city centers that receive a lot of effort from individuals. So to be able to try and distribute fish evenly and not have a collapse within that system due to the high pressure, SHL Works is a nice tool to share fish among people in a standardized, equitable fashion. Another place that SHL is being used is in lakes where they're attempting to recover the population, but where harvest is still desired by the public. And in those situations, the understanding is that if some fish are allowed to be harvested, the recovery process will go slower. Those are our two primary locations where the SHL system is used. It has also been used in certain situations where a lake has winter kills from time to time, or oxygen problems. Marcel, I'm not sure if your technical difficulties are back, but do you want to try and touch on that a little bit? Okay, looks like we still don't have them. So in some of the lakes that Marcel monitors, Amkiss Lake, that is one area where they were looking at using that as a tool to make sure that they can provide fish for harvest while still compensating for when low oxygen levels could result in a fish kill. So thank you for that question. I hope that provided some good info.
Great, thanks so much, Ben. All right, so we will move into the live Q&A for tonight. So again, we see there's been lots of really great questions that have been submitted. So again, if there's a question there that you'd like to see answered, please use the upvoting button, and we'll get through as many questions as we can in the time that we have for this evening. So first up, we have a question from Luke, just saying, good evening, AEP. In regards to the Class A tags, please make the size limit 50 to 58 centimeters or 50 to 60 centimeters. The current 50 centimeters and up puts those breeding females in jeopardy for the rest of their lives.
Well, that's an interesting question. Thanks, Luke, for that question. As Ben just said, we typically have SHL on lakes where we have a lot of fishing pressure. So close to Edmonton, Red Deer, we tend to get so much recycling of fish that we don't actually see many fish that get beyond 60 centimeters. And so the nice thing about the SHL tool is we could really target fish sizes, yet keep the numbers up. So we're constantly watching, ensuring that we have enough females to continue the population to ensure it's sustainable. And that's the wonderful thing about the SHL tool. So we don't tend to see many 60 centimeter fish because we get a lot of fishing, a lot of release mortality, plus the harvest that occurs through this SHL system. But we're here to listen, and that's an interesting thought of maybe bracketing it. But unfortunately, we didn't ask that for this session. But I'll file that away and think about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Stephen. All right, so our next question comes from Kenneth. So why has the special fish harvest license become the default licensing system for permitting fish harvest?
I can answer that one. Thanks, Kenneth. It's an interesting question. I think when I hear you ask about default, I guess I'm assuming that by default, you probably mean the most sort of common way of us providing harvest. And we just did a little bit of a tally, and I think this came up in a presentation yesterday evening too. And when we count up the harvest opportunities on our walleye fisheries, just focusing on that species, for instance, roughly 70% right now of our walleye fisheries, 129 out of 185 roughly, are, based on that 70% estimate, are providing some form of harvest opportunity. And we only have about 15 walleye SHL fisheries at the moment. So that's that's by far the minority. So that leaves about 114 walleye fisheries that are operating, providing harvest opportunities under some form of bag and size limit. And 38 of those 114 are new harvest opportunities by way of trying out a harvest slot limit. So that was new for 2020, and we're evaluating that as we go. But by far, the majority of our walleye fisheries currently are providing harvest opportunities. So hope that provides some clarification there. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Dave. All right, so our next question comes from Adam. So I feel the focus on managing walleye has led to a lack of regulation and monitoring of other species such as perch, whitefish, and burbot. Are there any other plans in line to help these species recover in pressured lakes?
Hi, Janine. I can answer that question. Thanks for the question, Adam. When we do our fall indexing assessments, we also collect data from those species you mentioned in your question, lake whitefish, burbot, yellow perch. There are plans to develop fish sustainability indexes for those species and a suite of appropriate regulations if there needs to be new ones. So yes, we are looking down the road toward those species, and certainly hopeful to recover any populations that are in trouble. So thanks again for the question.
Great, thank you, Bill. Our next question comes from Barry. Can you comment on whether there will be a special harvest license required for Gull Lake and or Sylvan Lake?
Yeah, hi Janine, I can take that question. So yeah, for Gull Lake, we actually did have a special harvest license on Gull Lake from 2017 and the 18 angling season, and also 2019. So we had it on in effect for 3 seasons. Last year at this time, we engaged and proposed to move it over to what's now the harvest slot regulation in place on Gull Lake. So it transferred over into that new management opportunity and harvest opportunity. So that's currently the regulation in place for Gull Lake. As for Sylvan Lake, we also consulted last year at this time, and due to the status there with the walleye not showing any signs of natural recruitment, and with the getting the investments within our fish culture system and an opportunity to look at put, grow, and take opportunities for walleye, Sylvan Lake was consulted on as a potential opportunity to go with in direction with that management action. So that where it transitioned into a different regulation of more of an enhanced or liberal one with one walleye no size limit, with the intent of doing annual or more frequent walleye stocking there for some additional angler experiences and opportunities. So hopefully that answers the question. Thanks, Barry.
Great, thanks, Jason. So our next question comes from Ray. Why do several lakes with special harvest licenses have high numbers of walleye while pike numbers, perch numbers, and lake whitefish numbers are quite low? Could a different harvest approach create improved balance of all the species?
Thanks for that question. I can address that. There's a bit of a legacy from how our management plans came in the late part of the 1990s, the early 2000s, and the walleye management plans came in with very restrictive regulations to protect walleye. A lot of lakes went to catch release, and that really gave walleye a chance to recover. Whereas by the time the pike plans came in, the regulations weren't as restrictive. They were mostly some level of harvest, and when a species is down, any sort of mortality can slow the recovery. So there's been a time lag. But having said that, like Laxanian's a good indication of where we're seeing some really good pike numbers, and numbers are coming back up. Perch numbers remain low where there's abundant predators, but that's to be expected. They're a smaller fish, they grow slower, they tend to be predated upon. So our better perch fisheries tend to be the smaller lakes that don't have the big predators. And as far as your question about lake whitefish, I'm not sure I'd agree that the numbers are low. From what I've seen, St. Anne, Pigeon, and other lakes, whitefish numbers are quite stable and are doing quite well. But thank you for the question.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Our next question is from Robert. Can you please clarify where the money from tags and fishing licenses go? I hear people say it's a money grab, but as I understand it, the majority of the revenue goes to ACA.
Well, I can answer that, Janine. Thanks. And thanks for that question, Robert. I think it's a really important question because it speaks to the accountability of our license revenues. And in Alberta, we're fortunate in that the majority of license revenues will go back into conservation and management programs that help improve, restore, and manage fisheries. So of each dollar that is spent on licenses, the revenue, 61% will go to the Alberta Conservation Association, which is a delegated authority. The ACA will use those for projects that are directed at enhancing, improving, and helping provide opportunities for angling in Alberta. 34% goes to the license provider in terms of administrative costs, as well as some programs within AEP itself that will go to help managing fisheries. The remainder, which is 5%, will go to general revenue fund within AEP. So that is a good accounting of how our resources are allocated in a way where we can sustain the resource and apply those funds directly back to conservation. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, Matt. All right, so I have another question from Kenneth here. So why do provincial fish managers limit the special harvest license to walleye when the original proposal as accepted by the minister was to use it for a potential harvest of a variety of fish populations?
Janine, I'll maybe jump in here and address Ken's question. Thanks, Ken. So good question, good observation. Of course, what we saw from the presentation tonight certainly was a summary where we've used walleye exclusively through the special harvest license program to date. Both Matt and Dave hit on this a little bit in some previous questions, and certainly we're not limited or needing to exclusively use walleye under the special harvest license and as it pertains to the regulation. Certainly that's been the case, and one of the previous questions also identified, walleye are our most popular target for fishing these days, so that's a lot of the reason why most of the tool has been used for walleye. But I think one of the pieces that'll be great input from this session and the engagement is we would be interested in hearing if the public is supportive of moving to different species located in this, using the special harvest license tool. I think there are opportunities for other species where we've used either for recovery or maintenance, where we've got high effort situations. And I think that's something we would want to consider going forward to see if there is public support to integrate more species. I'm making an assumption, Ken, that you would be supportive of that based on your question, but would look for your feedback in the survey as well on that. So thanks, Ken.
Great, thank you, Kadon. So we have another question from John here that says, once a tag goes undersubscribed, why can a successful applicant also not acquire those? The draw has already taken place and demand was not as high as the tag allocations. So with buying an undersubscribed license, you're not bypassing anyone.
Again, Janine, I can answer that one. That's a very good question. So originally when we came up with the SHL system, we wanted to distribute as many different walleye harvest opportunities amongst the composition of anglers that we have. So essentially, if you were in possession or if you were awarded a walleye tag license for that particular year, you were not eligible to apply for any other opportunities. What that does is it provides a much more equitable opportunity for all anglers within Alberta's resident angling population in order to be able to do that. That being said, we're going to look at the data and we're going to look at the number of unsubscribed tags. Most of them would occur in that Class C category and the smaller category that remain on the table. We're going to look how many of those tags will remain on the table at the end of each season. If it is a chronic problem and there is harvest opportunity, then we will look at providing other opportunities for current tag holders. Thanks, Janine.
Great, thank you, Matt. All right, so I have another question from Ken here. Given catch per unit effort has improved, there is a likelihood that more catch and release would take place. What mortality rates are being applied to catch and release, and how is this incorporated into the special harvest license determination?
I'll take that one. Thanks, Ken. So that's a really good question, and it helps us kind of describe how we calculate how many tags go out on a given lake. So in our current system with the 3 size categories, we'll conduct a fall index netting survey and use the numbers that we see within that to determine how many fish are in each size category. After that, we also incorporate information on angler effort, so how many people show up to a given lake, as well as how many people we feel purchase licenses and use their licenses out on the landscape. We just started receiving information from surveys through the realm emails asking people to tell us how many of their tags they were successful using. So we're able to fine tune that number even more. So getting at your question specific to incidental mortality, so the catch and release mortality, that links in highly with angler effort on a given lake. And so we anchor to that number of angler effort to use as a surrogate for estimating how much potential incidental mortality we see on a lake. So yes, that does influence how many tags are given out on a lake if we see shifts there. Yeah, so thank you for that question. I hope that provided a decent answer.
Great, thank you, Ben. So we have a question here from Ron, particularly about the electronic tags. So electronic tags are fine for people who use computers, but what about the many seniors who don't have smartphones or computers?
I can take that one. Thank you, Ron, for the question. As the tagging system, as we've heard tonight from both both Dave and Matt, the regulation has been adjusted to give us a broad range of tools to use as far as tagging goes. And one of that is just to expand to allow us to use electronic tags. With it can come different options for different circumstances, and to ensure that whatever the tag special license that's made available, that each user group has a chance to use it. So whether that be the current system, such as the adhesive tags, or electronic canceling tags on the license, it all feeds into the same system. So that a cancellation can be verified by an officer on the lake side. So it's as we transition and offer different options, we have to make sure that that we don't leave anyone out. So, but thank you tonight for your question.
Great, thanks, Stuart. And we have a similar question here from Craig. So I think the app tagging system would be open to a lot of abuse from people not entering fish unless fisheries come by. Would something like a hard plastic zip tie style tag not work better? People with poor cell coverage also might have issues entering it via an app.
Yeah, Janine, I can take that one as well. So yeah, that's a great question, Craig, and a valid concern as well. All of these tagging opportunities and tagging methods are subject to some kind of abuse. People tend to be as creative as possible if they want to get around any particular system that's in place. One of the fail-safes that we're working on building in as a potential option, if we do look at something like the electronic system, is that you don't require cell coverage. All you need is power to your cell phone. You can run the app independent of cell coverage, lock your harvest into the app, and it'll be recorded as such. That being said, we're still going to be looking at other options, as you suggested, such as the use of plastic or metal tags or some other means by which we can do this. We have to balance the efficacy of use along with the cost, the enforceability, and to make sure that we offer good opportunities for the management of walleye. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Okay, our next question comes from Adam, and he says, BC has a system whereby certain game fish are only harvestable pursuant to a quota system, similar in theory to our special harvest license tag system. However, they utilize a notched and dated license system to record harvest as opposed to our poorly designed tag system. Could we look at implementing something like this to rectify the many issues associated with the green adhesive tags?
So again,
Janine.
yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
Dave.
okay.
I was just going to say, with same as before, but Dave, you add some wisdom to this.
Well, one thing I do want to communicate is that I like that there's a lot of ideas that folks have coming forward about different tagging options. I think when we go out specifically with questions about options and can I guess put some of the pros and cons on the table, I'm looking forward to getting some good feedback. So very much appreciate that. And I'm familiar with that BC system. I believe I've used it successfully on a steelhead fishery once or twice. And I think like Matt indicated, we just have to find a way of validating harvest that meets our needs as a fisheries management group, is workable for the angling community, and meets the needs conveyed to us for enforcement and compliance interests as well. So I think within that space, there's lots of options we can consider. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Dave and Matt. So we have a question here from Dave, actually, wondering how can seniors get in on the special harvest license?
Hi, Janine, I can answer that one. Thanks for the question, Dave. Seniors can get onto the SHL license and tags very easily. Since I'm going to assume you're a senior, if you are a senior, you probably don't currently have a WIN card unless you hunt. If you don't have a WIN card, you can apply for one either online on the RAM website or at a retailer. If you do have a WIN card, then you can simply apply for your SHL license and tags during the application period each year. And that's typically in April, maybe the last 3 weeks of April. The draws are then made and the draw information and tags are then available early in May for purchasing. So I hope that answers your question. Thanks, Dave.
Great, thank you, Bill. So I have a question from Todd here, wondering about perch. So perch are also heavily harvested. Why do we not have a system for this species?
Well, hi, I can answer that. Good question, Todd. Perch are such a nice fish. They, but the one limiting thing is it takes them a while to grow. Like a 30 centimeter, 12-inch perch could be 16 years old. And I'm sure you've seen it. Our really good fisheries tend to be small lakes. And when the word gets out that there's good perch fishing, that within a week there'll be 50, 100 trucks on the lake, and the fishery doesn't last very long. And so we need to do more to help perch. And we've got frameworks for pike and walleye and some of our trout, but we have perch on the list to come up with a better plan for managing them. So good question. And yeah, I agree. I like perch too.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So just so folks are aware too, again, we've had a couple people from our panel having some technical issues on the background. So Marcel and Jason have turned their video off just because it's helping with their bandwidth for this evening. And Christy has dialed in by phone, so you won't see her on the screen, but she is here in the background. So we're just working through our technical issues there, so don't worry about that. So our next question comes from Ian. Can you please consider either a normal walleye harvest or a special harvest on Beaver Lake, Touchwood, Heart Lake, and Logan Lake? We fish all, and they all have a very healthy walleye population.
I can jump in here. I know Marcel was trying to get in on this question, Janine, but I know he's had a few technical difficulties, so I might just try to navigate it here, and Marcel can jump in if he gets a chance here. So great question, Ian. I appreciate that. It looks like most of those lakes are sort of in that northeast Lac La Biche area, if you will. So I'm not familiar with all the lakes, but I appreciate the input onto it. And I think the things I could speak to a bit more generally are, as we start to look at what the status is of populations, in some of our previous webinars, we've talked about status through things like our fish sustainability index. And then from there, identifying where are sustainable harvest opportunities available that we can provide to the public to provide some preference on, whether that be through a minimum size limit type of regulation, an SHL type of regulation, et cetera, based upon managing some of the effort on that. So my suspicion is on a lot of those lakes, if they're not in our online survey for this year, is that there probably is still some consideration being given to the status. The other piece on here that we always consider is the recreational aspect as compared to the other priorities under our fish and wildlife policy, which indicates that we do have to speak to conservation needs first, and then we do have to meet constitutionally protected harvest rates after that. And then from there, looking to see what we can also then provide and allocate through the recreational fishery that way as well. So those are all a whole bunch of considerations on all of those lakes, I suspect, Ian. Certainly I'd encourage you to, if not answered tonight, submit those questions through our Ask the Expert feature as well. And we'll make sure we can get some more details back to you. And of course, you can always call your local biologist to answer that. I'm sure Marcel would be happy to follow up if necessary. So thanks, Janine.
Excellent, thanks. So we have another water body specific question from Robert here, wondering if there will be a special harvest for southern Alberta lakes like Crawling, Valleys, McGregor, Kehoe, or Traverse, etc.
Hi, Janina. Yeah, can you hear me? I just wanted to make sure.
We can hear you. Yeah, you bet.
Ah,
Jason,
perfect.
thanks.
So, yeah, I can take this question. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have our subject matter expert, senior fisheries biologist from Lethbridge. That's these reservoirs fall within his management area to respond to. But from what I understand, yes, I think there is some considerations there, but based on current status. So again, depending which reservoirs, we have to look at, have we completed a recent assessment? What is the status of that fishery? Is it moderate risk, or is it a little bit higher risk? What is that population structure? What's the angling efforts? So all those factors play in a part and are considered in terms of first the management objective, and then depending on that management objective as to what is that right and correct regulation tool to use, whether or not that's SHL and tags, or whether or not that's a harvest slot, all come into effect. So again, those are some of the considerations, and I suspect, yes, there'll be some future consultation and engagement for some southern reservoirs for some additional opportunities. So hope that answered the question there. So thanks.
Great, thank you, Jason. So I have another question from Robert, wondering one of the reasons the slot program has such a large impact is because most people are drawn to lakes with slots. So why not have a combination of a tag system with slot, either by tags or punch tags with a low limit for take and keep per day?
I'll take that one, Janine. Thanks for the question, Robert. I'm not sure if you're able to sit in on the slot presentation yesterday. If not, it's been recorded and it's up on the website, so I highly recommend you check it out. We touched on that a little bit in that presentation, and the interesting thing was in this past year, we didn't see a significant difference between lakes managed under SHL versus slot. It actually seemed as though the SHL lakes had slightly higher angler effort than what we saw at our slot lakes, which was surprising to us as well. But that's just the way it rolled out. We're continuing to do monitoring of angler effort on these lakes. So we'll be able to assess if maybe they become more popular over time. But as of right now, we don't see a large difference in people using slot lakes more than a tag lake. Your comment about potentially combining the two options is an interesting one, and I've looked into it personally. I've modeled the catch rates and shown that it is a possibility, but it does complicate the regulation system a little bit. And right now we're looking at simplifying it. We're also looking at trying to understand how the slot system works currently, but having some type of open harvest in parallel with the tag system could be a possibility that we look at in the future. So thanks for that comment. We'll definitely mark it down and look at it as the time progresses. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Ben. All right, our next question comes from Riley. How close are you to rebooting the walleye stocking program to aid in the recovery of walleye populations? Would a walleye stocking program be able to eliminate the need for a tag system by adding thousands of walleye into lakes with high angling pressure? You're sounding a little bit like a robot tonight, Craig. We might have to check your audio and come back to you.
Here, I'll try to help out while Craig's internet catches up.
Okay, great. Thank
you.
So
that's interesting. And in fact, we had completely intended on having the walleye stocking program start last spring, but that was all canceled because of COVID, unfortunately. So, I want to separate that program from stocking over a natural population. So that's something we really want to avoid. And when you actually run the numbers, it doesn't make sense to stock over a natural population because there's so many females in a lake that the egg production is phenomenal. So it's not a problem about producing kids. It's a problem of survival to get bigger. So that's the limitation if you run the numbers to producing fish in Alberta lakes. But the walleye stocking program, the intent of that is to create walleye fisheries in lakes where there currently isn't sustainable walleye populations. And so that's a put, take, and grow program. So we'll put in fry or fingerlings into water bodies, and in 4 to 5 years, hoping for good survival, they'll be available for harvest. So that's the intent of that program. So two different things. We don't want to stock over natural populations. There's concerns of genetics and introducing disease, that sort of thing. And then there's really no need because there's just so many eggs in a viable population that we don't need to put on top of that. I know other jurisdictions do, but I could go on for a while for that. But yeah, very interesting question. It's something I could go on for a long time, and I'll stop. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Craig, do you wanna try and respond again now? No.
I might, I can jump in a little bit, maybe just to Janine. I'm not going to do this justice like Craig would, but, I think the other half of the AAP program is the fish culture side. And, Craig has done a great job positioning our fish culture program to be the delivery model or the raising model of what Stephen just indicated. So Stephen hit on that right on the top of his response. Is the intent in spring of 2020 was to reinitiate that walleye program. That is AAP's intent in 2021. Obviously, there's a number of COVID dependencies that we may have to stick handle around that. We're hoping that we're able to run that. And on the fish culture side, that program is ready to do that part with us as well. So we've got a robust program. We're hoping to get it done underway and basically go down the road that Stephen just talked about, is providing more walleye opportunities for Albertans again, as soon as we can get it going again.
Great, thank you, Kaitlyn. We'll work on getting Craig's audio fixed so that he can respond to some questions where we can understand him as well. Sorry about this, folks. So our next question comes. Yes.
Janine, it's Matt here. I rather liked having Jabba the Hutt, Craig, on the it's quite entertaining.
For sure, it adds some entertainment to the evening, you bet. So our next question here comes from Ron. saying, good evening. We have been fishing at Wolf Lake for years. We have been fortunate that someone in the family has been successful in getting a tag. I have no problems with the tag system. The problem I have is when campers next to us have a Métis card and can fish as much as they want and catch any size. Does this not go against having a tag system?
Janine, I can answer Ron's question. Thanks, Ron. So, you know, I guess when we review our policy for allocating fish stocks, and again, this was covered in previous presentations. If you're able to review them, the ones that are saved to our website, our first priority is conservation, to make sure there's enough fish in the population to sustain itself. And then the second priority below conservation is Indigenous, fulfilling Indigenous rights. And that's very important to us. It's a strong part of our mandate. Recreational fisheries are allocated, you know, one level below that in the priority ranking. So those, the Métis and First Nations people in Alberta have constitutionally protected rights to harvest fish, wildlife in Alberta, as long as they are recognized as having those rights. And it's not that they get to exercise those rights without rules in place. In order to fish, they need a domestic fishing license, and that license used to only allow them to use a gill net to fish for their food needs. But we made a change recently to allow them also to use a rod and reel. So now they don't have to set a net and deal with potentially large numbers of fish. They can be quite selective in harvesting fish to feed themselves and their families. And you know, that's there's rules in place for the use of rod and reel and gill nets, and water body specific rules as well that actually put size limits or minimum mesh size restrictions if nets are being used. So there are conservation-based rules in place for those folks to exercise their rights using those licenses. And when we manage a fishery, when we allocate recreational harvest, we need to also consider the degree to which that fishery is utilized by the Indigenous communities. And we do factor that in to the best extent we can. And we have tools available to allow us to do that. And I believe that as we go forward, we'll have increasingly improved tools and we'll be able to refine our allocation of fish to recreational use with better information around the Indigenous needs. So thanks. It's something that we've been working hard at over the past few years here to, you know, to make better. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Dave. So our next question here comes from Ken. Any consideration to consider special harvest licenses for other fish populations amenable to harvest that otherwise would not be suited to other harvest approaches?
Hi, Janine. I can answer Ken's question. Yes, it's a pretty straightforward answer. Yes, there are considerations to consider using SHL on other fish populations. That's the beauty of the tool. It would allocate, as you know, it allocates fish based on their abundance and size structure in a sustainable fashion. The challenge, though, behind it is developing the tool for those species and having the population abundance and structure data to support that. Included in that, though, as Ben mentioned earlier, is we also need other information to allocate SHL, and that includes release mortality, and as Dave Park mentioned, even Indigenous use because of their harvest. So there's a little bit of work that goes into it for us to develop SHL for other species, but yes, there's considerations to do that. Hope that helps. Thanks, Kent.
Great, thank you, Bill. So our next question will come from Peter, wondering if the greater than 50 centimeter walleye are the prime breeders. Why would they be considered harvestable in any situation if the population is at all threatened? They should be automatically, or they should be an automatic release size.
I can take this question, Jean. Thanks very much for your question, Peter. As you may have remembered, Stephen kind of alluded to this a little bit with his answer earlier with respect to walleye stocking. The number of eggs isn't really so much the issue. So there's, the females that are there are more than capable of producing the eggs necessary for the next generation. It's really more of a growth issue. So with the monitoring that we do, we are able to account for that in the models and allocate those fish appropriately. So yeah, I hope that answers your question there. And again, thanks very much for sharing your thoughts.
Great, thank you, Chris. So Brian, I see your question here saying walleye tags have been opening the door for abuse on the tag system and people reuse them over and over by improper tagging. What are your current finds and how do you plan to patrol this improper tagging and people taking more than what is allowed? So this is a question that for this evening we're going to defer and we'll have some of our folks from our Fish and Wildlife Enforcement branch actually respond to this. So Brian, we will post a response to this on that Ask the Expert tool on our engagement page that we've spoken about tonight. So you can expect to see that coming soon. So we'll defer your question to those experts in our department. So the next question. Oh, yeah.
Janine,
go ahead,
I could just one thing. Some of our best eyes and ears on the lakes are our anglers, and whenever we're seeing activity like this or know about that activity occurring, it's always best to there's the 1-800 RAP line that we can utilize it and to let officers know that that activity is occurring. It builds the case, and the fines are there as deterrents to keep that from happening. So reach out for that and utilize that report a poacher line whenever you see that activity. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks for adding that in, Stuart. It's really, really important for all of our anglers out there on the landscape to let us know what they're seeing for sure. So the next question here comes from Mike. Has there been any research to determine what size or age of female fish eggs result in a high number of eggs that produce high quality eggs, which result in fry? So if fish are like any other reproducing living thing on Earth, the egg quality drastically reduces as the age increases. Therefore, keeping slot-sized fish may contribute to the most reproduction, not the older or larger fish.
I'll take this one. It's a very complex question and a very interesting one too. So I'm gonna geek out on this for a little bit here. I don't know if you know what you got yourself into, but within Alberta or within walleye, fish mature females differently in different lakes. So I can't give you a hard number and say this is exactly when a walleye becomes mature as a female in Alberta, but it ranges roughly from the upper 30s to low 50s, depending on what lake it is. And as female walleye get larger, they do produce more eggs. But I think your question also touched on a little bit is a higher quality egg. So in my mind, that would be an egg with more nutrients in it, possibly a larger egg, better than more eggs. And that is a really difficult answer to come by. This has been studied before and it varies species by species. But if we purely look at the fact that females produce more eggs as they get larger, and your statement about potentially wanting to protect them as they get bigger, that statement is true. Those females would compose a smaller proportion of the biomass, but those females would have more eggs that they're putting out on the landscape. So I'm just going to stay away from the higher quality egg component and just purely talk about numbers. So I hope that gave some information about walleye and walleye reproduction.
Great, thanks, Ben. All right, so our next question here comes from Clinton. Can I ask why Uticuma Lake isn't open for walleye? Fishing has been historically unbelievable, and for size of lake underfished, being limited summer access, and very little of the lake fished in winter due to its size. So I think this is a good question for Christy to answer. So we're going to try. We've got her on the phone, so we'll see if we can get her here.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Christy. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Clinton. Thanks for the question. So Uticuma Lake. Currently, our last survey of Uticuma Lake occurred in 2017. As a result of that survey, we found that walleye densities were very low. So an FSI of 1 or a very high risk, meaning that we didn't find many during that survey. Uticuma Lake has experienced periods over time of fantastic, beautiful large walleye, but at very low densities. We've got a large lake, as you pointed out in your question, that's also quite shallow. We do have very little access to the lake. Summer access is quite difficult, but we also have a challenge sustaining walleye populations in the lake. As a result of our 2017 survey, we brought forth to the public through engagement and consultation, asking if the public would like to see a liberal harvest regulation or a catch and release regulation. As a result, those changes were made, and unfortunately, we haven't seen a rebound in the walleye fishery in the last few years. Upcoming in the next year or so, we'll go back and we'll survey Uticuma Lake once again and hopefully find some improvement in the walleye. However, historically, we've seen highs and lows in that walleye population, and it's been inconsistent as far as what we've seen year to year in recruitment for the lake. I hope this helps answer your question. Thanks for the questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christy. Glad that we could get you on the phone there. So our next question comes from Clarence. If special harvest licenses allows minimal risk to fish populations, why are you promoting frequent testing?
Yeah, Janine, I can take this one. So yeah, hopefully I'm interpreting the question as promoting frequent testing as monitoring. So monitoring certainly is an important tool to evaluate the status of the fishery to ensure that we are meeting those objectives and ensuring that the population is stable, and also those numbers are used to allocate out certainly if there is some surplus on those different size categories for walleye. So we want to ensure that we can maximize that opportunity to the anglers, or certainly respond in time if that population is declining, that we could reduce those number of tags, especially if there is a shortage in one of those size categories. So on average, every 3 to 5 years is typically what we do for the frequency of our monitoring. On a majority of our actively monitored water bodies. Sometimes it's a little bit more in terms of years before we can maybe get to a fishery. And then certainly, with that testing, we also do look to allocate the fish that we collect in those index netting surveys to our local First Nations for them for subsistence purposes as well. So the fish do get used. So hopefully that answers the question. Thanks, Jenny, and Clarence for submitting that.
Well, thanks, Jason.
Just to add a little bit to that, that was great, Jason. The more we know, the closer we can get, the more fish we can allocate with the special harvest license, and that's one of the benefits of it. We watch it very closely so that we can allocate as many fish as we possibly can. So if the gas gauge breaks on your truck, you're going to likely be keeping it fuller than you would than if you had a very precise gas gauge on it. So that's a good analogy that we're watching the gas gauge very carefully, and if it goes down, we can reduce. If it goes up, then we can allocate more. So that's one of the big benefits of the SHL. We're watching it carefully and allocating pretty well to the max what we can as far as harvest.
Great, thanks for adding to that, Stephen. So the next question is from Ian. Could the any size slot have a maximum, like 55 centimeters, to protect the very large spawning female?
So I'll take this one. By the slot, I assume we're talking about the SHL system, the any size SHL system that was described in the presentation. Currently within that system, it wouldn't have one. It would to allow freedom to harvest fish of any size. If we receive feedback back from the anglers that was something that they wanted, that's something that we could consider. But if we did put that cap there, it would reduce the possibility of harvesting fish above that size. One of the nice things with the current three tag system or three size system is that if we start to feel that those larger size fish, losing those is a problem, we can reduce the number of tags in that system. When we go to the any size, that we lose control as biologists on how to allocate fish. So that is, you keyed into one of the nice functions of our current system, and something that would be lost if we did go to an any size. So that's an option. It's something we could consider. As of right now, it's not something that we're looking at. But thanks for the question.
Great, thanks, Ben. So we'll go to a question from Clinton next here. Why are we trying to protect walleye in some lakes that are not historically walleye lakes? It seems that we are running some historic, excellent panfish lakes with protecting walleye and having a reduced option of panfish lakes due to the overpopulation of walleye in these lakes, again, reducing the panfish numbers and causing major pressure on those that do sometimes end up having them.
I can try to jump in here, maybe Janine as well. So great question. Thanks very much, Clinton. So maybe what I'll do is I'll generalize a little bit out here. And by panfish, I'm going to maybe make the assumption you might be talking about species like perch, for instance. So I know when we began, and I think one of our colleagues talked about this maybe previously in one of the sessions or even tonight, where we did a lot of walleye stocking across Alberta going back into the 1990s as part of a significant effort to increase recreational and harvest opportunities for walleye across the province of Alberta. That had a lot of public input into it and into the lakes that were selected on that. Overall, I think we would deem that quite successful in the sense that we do have a lot more walleye lakes that we, I think, enjoy today that do have in many cases, good populations of walleye. I think a lot of folks have provided positive responses to being able to go out, catch walleye. I know there are challenges with providing harvest for walleye in some of those lakes. We're talking about that with a system tonight of limited harvest. So the one thing I would stress is that, through that selection, there's been public input and will continue to be public input in regards to the fisheries management objectives for those lakes. That includes what species we're managing for in terms of priority or emphasis on. So I'd certainly encourage bringing forward if there are some specific lakes you're talking about. I think there's still positive response from Albertans. We see that regularly, that walleye are still a sought after species and folks do want to spend time angling with them or for them going ahead. So certainly I'd again encourage any comments and lake specific suggestions that you might have through our survey or through Ask the Expert as well. So I hope that helped, Clinton. Thanks, Janine.
Great. Thanks, Katon. And we'll remind you as well that next week we have our regional webinars, and that's a great place to bring forward some of these lake-specific questions that you may have if you haven't put them into the Ask the Expert already. So we have a question from Brian here. What are some lakes that could become part of the special harvest license program in the coming future?
I can take that one, Janine. Thanks for your question, Brian. Currently, we don't have any plans for specific lakes. Actually, as Katon just mentioned, if you do have a lake that you have a particular interest in, you can certainly put those comments into your survey or, again, reach out to a local expert. In general, as we've been discussing tonight, the SHL program is for lakes that have a usually a high level of harvest that would overwhelm a more, the more traditional bag limit. So currently we don't have any of those lakes on the radar, but again, as populations change, both fish populations and the human population, in those higher traffic areas gets a little bit, larger over the years, there may, be the requirement for some of those lakes to then go to an SHL program. So hopefully that answers your question there. And again, if you do have specific lakes that you are thinking about, please do reach out and ask the expert on it.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
Just I could add to that. One lake that we currently have identified, the fall surveys have identified an opportunity is currently open in the questionnaire that's currently out, and that's Wadman Lake. So if you go there, it's one where the monitoring has identified an opportunity, and whenever an opportunity is there, we reach out to our anglers and ask them what they would like to see. So I encourage you to visit following the session. Join us. We'll be speaking more about Wadman Lake next week on Monday, and fill out the survey. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Stuart. All right, so our last question of the evening here is from Ian. Could some lakes have any size and some a control size, like A and B size, to protect vulnerable sizes? Sorry.
Hi, Jeannie. I can, good, interesting question, Ian. We are asking some questions that are very much like you've put together in your question here. So I encourage you to pick which one you like. We typically try, you might have a hard time believing this, but we try to keep the angling regulations as simple as possible. And so we'll likely pick something that people vote on the most is how the SHL program will go forward. So it'll be one option, and maybe something down the road, but in the near future, it'll likely be just one of the things that we've put forward for your engagement on. So I encourage you to go on and do the survey if you haven't already. Thank you. Good question.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Stephen. All right, so as we go into sort of the wrap up for tonight, first of all, we just want to thank everybody for sticking with us tonight and asking so many wonderful questions and being engaged. We're really excited to see that we have so many people who are able to join us throughout these sessions. So again, thank you very much. Again, here's the link to find all of the resources that we have available. So we've referenced a few things tonight, one being the survey, of course, which we really would like you to fill out, and that is open until February 8th at 9 a.m. But we also have some other additional opportunities to learn. So for all of the water bodies that have proposed changes, there are fact sheets that are posted on this main engagement page. Now, the Ask the Expert that we've been referring to, you will find when you click through to the Participate Online section of the webpage, and that's where you can go and you can view all of the other questions that have been submitted, as well as submit your own question. So if you're looking for a direct response, you can go ahead and type your question in there and we'll get back to you sort of as soon as possible. We're striving for three business days at this point. So not only do we have that, but we also have some more webinars coming up. So tomorrow is our last evening for webinars this week. It's our native trout program update before we move into the regional webinars that we have next week. So if you do have really specific questions about water bodies, again, we're encouraging you to use the Ask the Expert or to join us next week. We will be addressing a lot of the lakes that people may be interested in already. So you can find the agendas for those meetings in the Zoom invite as well. So the registration links for these can also be found on our webpage as well. And then last but not least, we'd really encourage you to get involved. We love engaging with our anglers and chatting with you all. So please follow us on Facebook if you have an account. If you haven't liked us already, this is really where we post a lot of our updates and engagement opportunities throughout the rest of the year. And of course, the family fishing weekend is coming up soon in February here, where you can fish without a sport fishing license, but all regulations still apply. So thank you very much, folks, for joining us this evening. Again, we're so thankful to have so many people engaged and involved, and we look forward to hearing from you on the survey and hopefully in some of our future webinars. So have a